ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Prashnopanishad deals with prana, but when it deals with prana, it tries to cover all aspects of the creation. Creation, non-creation, everything that's available. Non-creation means unmanifest. Everything has been there, and that has been given by Prashnopanishad. There's a very interesting thing about this Prashnopanishad. The students come to the teacher and ask the questions, and these are the students who are already Brahmaparaha, Brahmanishtaha, and they would like to get the knowledge of the Param Brahman. And for that, they have come to the teacher Pipalada. And the discussion is going on where the first question they asked about where from this whole creation is come. And this question is a very standard question. Very many Upanishads that you can find that. Yato va imani bhutani jayante. Where from this creation come? And all that. But here the way that he uses, the beginning itself that there are the two things that are created, and that's what is prana and rai, and then he goes elaboration into that. After that he comes to the next one question saying that where is the what about the various worlds are created, everything. Then also he comes to the level of where is the human being. That's where our interest about the Prashnopanishad, where different types of prana, how the prana divides itself into five different pranas, pancha pranas, and all that. That we have seen. And the third question, and now in the fourth question, it's a very interesting thing. It's for the Jagrata, Swapna, Sushupti, wakeful, sleep, and the dream states. And who operates these things? Where all these things emerge? All these questions he is asking. Now, before going to these experiences, I had given the idea that how the simple model of what is something which is all pervading becomes uh, all pervading, which has got absolute total freedom. That's what is the consciousness. Also has a freedom to give up its freedom to become something which is of a lesser freedom. For what reason? So that it can interact. And that interaction is the one that he enjoys. The joy is there in that interaction, and that's what we have seen in Taittiriya Upanishad also. That food and the hunger is the way that the division takes place. And then that division, the food comes in contact with the hunger, then the hunger, then there is experience of bliss, satisfaction that is there. So therefore, this interaction is the one which again and again pushes towards that satisfaction, supreme sense of satisfaction within. And it further divides into various things. And the way that in the human being that all this it will be divided into various prana. But in the case of nature, also you can see that it divides into the panchabhutas. And as you can see that how the development takes place at the akasha level, that there is a total, there is such a vast freedom. And from that, when it comes to vayu, agnihi, apaha, teja, so that means to say little by little, giving his freedom to become something which is of a lesser freedom. At the matter level, that is what we see the least freedom, and there are several things that exist at the matter level. So this multiplicity is created. But this whole model seemed to be like a mechanical model. Now, in a mechanical model, what is it is most important problem is that exactly the way that it is uh, like cause and effect connection. It is it is bound by the equation. So that's how the creation takes place. Like for example, water uh, becomes steam becomes water by cooling it down at one particular point of temperature. It becomes water, and water further you cool down, it becomes ice. So it looks like a very big mechanical process that is there. So, from the science point of view, when you look at it, it's all the energy basically, and the energy becomes all those kind of things. When you have that idea of energy and becoming all these things, that there is nobody like a freedom within. It is just happening one after the other steps without any particular emotion behind it. The creation is basically like a mechanical model. The same thing about the nature also, that when you look at it from the sun, a part came out in the form of an earth, and then several sparks came out of earth in the form of moon. It has come out, and then it goes around the earth, and all that mechanically it is organized. So everything is look like mechanical. That means to say you can go to work out the formulae by which that they move, they work. The formula is in our hands. That means to say all those things are bound by certain degree of the determined way of doing things. Whereas there is no degree of freedom that is there available. So it looks like this as a mechanical model. The same way when it comes to the human being, also a lot of people look at the practices of the spirituality, the yoga, all these things also they look at from a very mechanical point of view. It is not so easy to look at them in the mechanical point of view, like the way that you do. I've heard so many times that people talking about yoga therapy, where you do you have diabetes, you do this asana, your diabetes will go away. You have hypertension, you do one, two, three, four, then you will be all right. Meditation, and if you're neurotic, then don't do meditation. That this like that. There are several like the way that mechanical model that they give, as if there is nothing which is humanistic behind it, or something which is more than mechanical equation that is available. So this is how basically the whole understanding is corrupted into it. Further, the same way that about meditation, Patanjali has given us the various beautiful steps on meditation. And then people think that you sit down and then sit for next first 15, 20 minutes, you do dharana, and the next 20 minutes you are in dhyana, and then practice next 20 minutes samadhi, as if it is something that you just switch on and switch off kind of a thing. It's like a mechanical device. It's nothing beyond that. But that's not the way the things are. It does not happen like that. It is something much more different, because at all levels there is what is called as consciousness, which is percolating with that. Though consciousness has become something which is lesser conscious, but manifest consciousness is not there. But consciousness itself is continuing at all these different levels. So that is why, and that consciousness is the one which adds the degree of freedom that happens. Our German doctor friend, where we were doing the research on various aspects of meditation, he would say that if meditation practice is something which is repeatable, that means it exactly follows the same order day after day after day. If it happens like that, then it is not meditation, because it's something which is mechanical. Some days it happens, some days it doesn't happen, some days your mind is wandering, sometimes doesn't wandering. This kind of a thing, when you see the mind, that shows that the mind is lively. A lively equation is something where this freedom is there, whereas which is non-lively, which is mechanical, where there is no freedom. Like the way that whatever that you can say you have the freedom because that you have something, whereas the computer which listens to it and puts into the words and all those things, it does not have a freedom. Whatever that comes out of you, it exactly picks up and then puts it there. It does not have a freedom whether it is right or wrong, whether it is okay or wrong, or shall we wait for some time. All these things are not there because computer, however extraordinary, wonderful gadget it may be, it is still a mechanical device. So this is what we need to realize, that the way that Indian philosophy looked at the origin of this creation is not that fixed mechanical kind of a device, but it is something which is lively, which has got the consciousness behind it. So that is how all the. And another thing is that what he was trying to connect us is together with the cosmic world outside to the human being is connected. And this connection through the time, through the space, and everything is in the creation appears from that consciousness itself becomes like this. This is what we have seen. Now, there is another very important aspect is that if it were only just mechanical, that man is something which is a product of that whatever that consciousness is there, and it becomes like man, and it includes various elements, panchabhutas, five elements together. And if it is only model of that particular nature, then we become human being. Okay, fine. But then there is a portion where there is a part where we are wakeful. That means we are functioning. Where we are not functioning, non-wakeful. These are the two phases that will be available if it were to be simple mechanical kind of a model. But it's our experience is not that. Apart from these two, we also have one more thing, and that's what is the dream state. And the dream state is something which is very, very interesting for us. So, therefore, basically, now after talking about the idea of the creation from the macrocosm to the microcosm when he comes, and he talks about five different pranas, all that he gives, and then now further in this particular chapter he comes to the level of trying to understand what is called as wakeful dream and deep sleep state, and who is that who is going through these experiences, wakeful and sleep state, and also the dream state. He talks about it. Now, before we understand this, the way that he brings about certain analogies, we'll try to work on that analogies. And the analogy is about the yajna, about the yajna or the ritual that we do. We do several soma yajna, this yajna, that yajna, and mrityunjaya yajna. So all these things, different kind of yajnas that are there. So that he brings about this point in this particular discussion. So let me talk about a little about this yajna. Now, we reference to this yajna comes many times in Bhagavad Gita and also various other Upanishads also. In Bhagavad Gita, it says that even the food that we take is also like yajna. That's why it is Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam. And that's what we talk about it. So, this, and not only this, even the creation itself is like a yajna that is going on. And yajno yajnena kalpitam. In fact, this is what is uh, in the Rudram Chamakam, and then you can come across that prano yajnena kalpitam, apano yajnena kalpitam, vyano yajnena kalpitam, samano yajnena kalpitam, like that, all those things. And then finally comes to yajna, and it says yajno yajnena kalpitam. Yajna becomes part of yajna. So therefore, that means to say there is yajna aspect of it is so prevalent in this particular culture. This is one aspect of it. In yajna, that there are several people, brahmanas, are the several people who are chanting these things, and various other people doing so many things that are there. Yajna means it's a combination of so many things that are there. In fact, we were so strict in those days when this yajna was very prevalent, and then today also in the Orthodox places where the yajna is prevalent, when you go there, you can see that there are different kind of people who are doing various different kind of things, and they have different names like Hota, and then Havyaka, and all those things. They are there who doing various things. The mantras that are there separate for them. Hota will chant certain mantras, and so like that there are several portfolios that are there who are doing several things. The idea is that they maintain such a purity at all these levels. That means to say, what one is doing is strictly adhering to that for years together, generations after generations, so that there's a perfection in that area, in that particular skill that they were doing it. So similarly, we have the people who are supposed to be in the temples, priests, and then they do all the temple work, whatever that is supposed to be. They have Agama Shastras, whatever that is there, and they follow it meticulously. So this is how these people are given. Apart from that, we have Agni, different types of fire that is there, and Garhastha Agni and Vajpayee Agni and all these things that are there, which are in those days when this Upanishad is given, or much later also, almost like thousand, few thousand years ago, at least 1,000 years ago, this used to be common for in the common knowledge place. So these examples that they are used, the analogy that is used about yajna is something which is very common. People could understand. Whereas today in our modern culture, we don't see this yajna culture now. And one particular thing that he says is the Garhastagni, and then so like that, there is some Agni that is kept in the house, very sacred, and from that Agni, that all other things are fired. So this is a very, and it's a practical use also. It was a, let me talk about that, how our culture used to be those days. Uh, they used to make fire through some yajna by actually by friction. They used to bring about that fire. That itself, creating the fire. Recently, that we had the Soma Yajna where the priest was creating a fire, and we were all watching there. I was also part of that particular process that was going on. And the moment that the fire starts in that Karani, supposed to be Karani is a thing where you produce that fire. The fire will come so little, and then slowly we try to nurture it. Like the way that the baby nurtured in the beginning to see that how the baby becomes big. So initial stages that the fire is kindled and then it is nurtured, and it was so nice to see that the priest was holding the fire in a nice, wonderful setup in hands, and then he was swinging like the way that you swing a child, newly born child. When all those things, when you see that, then slowly what happens is within you that you transcend the material concept of it, and you see that in the fire that there is a humanness, and we need to preserve that and pass it on to the next. So like that, this whole emotion is created behind it, so that we will take care of that. We have respect for that fire, and that fire that is created like that is kept in the house where it will not die. And every day, now and then, you put the oil, you put the wheat, and all those things, preserve that forever. So this is supposed to be the fire of Yajamana, the house, the owner of the house. That is the fire. And when the Yajamana dies, at that, or any activity that takes place in that house, they use that fire so that the activity that they do gets that sanctity, and it used to be something which is directly coming from the God. So the sankalpa is from the God, therefore, that including the daily food that people used to have, the fire they used to light the fire for cooking from this particular lamp. And the same way that the night lamp, we used to burn it with that particular fire, so that the fire is transferred from the main fire to this particular thing. So all these things will become part of that main fire only. So therefore, that there is a respect for this as much as that we have a respect for the yajna. So all these things are yajna. The very concept of yajna is something which binds you with certain amount of discipline in a very positive sense, in a very elevated sense, not in the sense of the depriving you from the uh, sensory participation. So therefore, that this fire yajna and this fire component is something also which uses here in understanding and trying to understand about these particular stages that are there. Now, the main fire is the sun that we have. From the sun, all these things have come. And from the sun that we have prana, and from the Mukhya prana, from all these other pranas are divided to us. So, and all these pranas that are there manifest in the form of various sensory perceptions and organs. Now, this prana that is there is the one which creates these senses, and the senses have the capacity to function. Actually, it is not that the eyes have the power of seeing, but it is the power of seeing that is there, which is supposed to be the subtle aspect of gross seeing, and that produces the eyes to see that the gross seeing takes place, interaction with the world outside takes place. So therefore, that there is what is called as the subtle aspect of seeing, and it becomes like a gross aspect of seeing. The gross aspect of seeing is called as the seeing, chakshu, and the eyes, and then subtle aspect of it is what is called as tanmatra. So, like that, all the senses have their what is called as tanmatra, and the tanmatra is the subtle aspect of all these things, and which creates that subtle body. So that means to say, basically, that the consciousness becomes a subtle body, and the subtle body becomes the gross body, and the gross body interacts with all those things with the world outside. So this is what we know that it is happening. Now, after that, until this point, that it is very clear, it is understandable. But then there is one more thing that he earlier that we have seen in the third sutra. There's one thing that he brings about, and which is like, who is the one whose order all these things happen, and there he just brings about in the third query, in the third question, he says that Atmana Yesha Prano Jayate, from Atma becomes the prana, Yathesha Purushe Cha, Etasmin Eva Etad Atatam, then Manokrutena Ayati Asmin Sharire. So what is the way that it enters into? It enters into Manokrutena. He brings about this idea of mind. Manokrutena. Mind is the one which makes this particular prana enter into the body, and the whole creation has taken place. So therefore, here let's try to keep remember that idea of Manokrutena, and later on there is one more thing that is there, and it says. Uh, Yachitta, that is 10th sutra, he says that in the third shloka, Yachitta enaisha pranamayati pranaha tejasa yuktaha. The prana comes with tejas. This tejas is something which is very important here, prana, and the prana united with tejas, it comes into the picture that it's like the tejas which brings about this prana into the body. Then it becomes all these udana, vyana, sapana, all those things. And then athehinam. Now, the fourth question starts with the way Sauryayani Gargaha Papracha. He is Sauryayani. He is the grandson of Surya. And then he questions the Bhagavan, Etasmin Purushe Kani Swapanti, Kani Asmin Jagrati, Katarha Yesha Devaha, Swapnan Pashyati, Kasyayita Sukham Bhavati, Tasminnu Sarve Sampratishtha Bhavanti iti. So now, after becoming human being, it is just the progression from the consciousness becoming human being. Then he says, Kasminnu Purushe Kaniswapanti. That means to say, which of this organ in the sleep, that sleep in man. which of the organs that sleep in man, which again are awake in him, and which is the Devata, which sees the dream, whose is the happiness, whose is the dream, and what do all these things indeed, which do all these things indeed happen? This question becomes very important because you see, the sleep is a state where wakeful is there, after all our senses are there, sense are functioning, and then we are present in the world, and then we are interacting with the world. So all these things are happening. But when we sleep, it looks like, as an experiencer of us, that it looks like we are not at all there. They are absolutely gone, finished. We don't remember anything. It looks like we died, we finished. We are not existing. In fact, some people suffer from this kind of a fear also, that in the sleep I might die, because sleep is like a death. There's nothing that is remaining. But then you know that there is something which is remaining, and you wake up and everything comes back. So that means there must be some things which are not sleeping in the sleep. You are not sleeping completely. It looks like that you are not sleeping completely. Or there is somebody who is other than you is wakeful in the here, and then he is wakeful there in the sleep when you are sleeping. So that means to say there is nothing that there is, it's not complete to say that I am sleeping, because that this we if it is everything is sleeping, then there are so many vital functions which are going on, and there are so many activities which are going on. Memory is also there, and you wake up and come back again. All these things. But from the experience point of view, that you are sleeping, that means basically that this wakeful experience, it is not you, completely you. And we have unnecessarily assumed this wakeful experiencer is everything, whatever it is there in the wakeful state, and that we feel everything, but that is not your completeness. Or, in other words, that you have become a wakeful experiencer, one portion of it, and wakeful object world, everything that you create, and then your interaction is taking place. This is what is in the wakeful state. But in the sleep, that all these things are not there existing, but then there is another person who is there, supposed to be, that you create, and that person is managing the things that are there inside in a subtle way, which is not connected with this objective world outside, which means essentially that there are several activities which are going on within you which are not connected with the objective world outside. So, therefore, basically, that a wakeful man now tomorrow dies, it is not the end of the death of the whole personality at all, and there is something which need to continue. So, and another thing is that whatever that is there in the wakeful personality experiencing, it has these three different aspects that are there. One is the objective world outside, that is matter, vastu, and second thing is your senses, the one who interacts with the objective world outside, the senses, eyes, ears, etc., etc. And third is that there is what is called as that your experience that is there, and these three aspects, the interaction experience, that's what is vritti. Now these three things are created: vastu, object outside, and the sensory organ. Actually, sensory organ is there, therefore vastu is there. If the sensory organ is not there, vastu is not there. Like, for example, for a blind man, the vastu object is not there, he cannot see anything. So therefore, basically, that object of seeing is not there. The object is there otherwise, because that is other senses are there, for that object is there. But the description of the object that is there connected with that sense is absent for a person whose the sensory organ is absent. Similarly, for a silent, for a person who doesn't is there. That means there is no sounds outside at all. The sounds are not created. Experience of sound is not there. Once that is not there, vritti does not take place. Vritti is also not there. So actually, if you look at it, that means to say if you do not have these senses, then there is no vrittis at all. But then we have senses. A lot of people, that's why they think that you kill the senses, vrittis will be gone. That's why vritti nirodha, a lot of people think that by tapas means that actually that you kill the sensory organs. The eyes are there, therefore I see the object outside. So let me plug the eyes so that I don't see the objective world outside. So that they try to interact with this idea, saying that the seeing, hearing, and all those things are the vrittis, and then vritti is connected with the mind. Now, let's not go into that. Sensory object is there, the sensory perception is there, and then perception is going on. These three things are there. Vastu is there, Vishaya is there, and then Vishaya Samparka is there, and then and the sensory organ, and then Vritti, the activity that's going on there. If these three things are just isolated, that means to say they just come there and then they go away, then there is no problem at all. It's like in front of a mirror. Everything is in front of the mirror and that goes away and finished. That's over. But it's not like that for the sake of human being. Why? Because basically what happens, all these things that are there, the moment that you go to sleep, that means when you go to rest, where do all these things go? Object also will merge, subject also will merge, and the interaction, the interplay also will merge. Everything merges into one central unit called as the prana. So when swapanti, that means to say there is one who is there in the sleep, that you are there in the sleep, and you withdraw all those things into the sleep, so that all the activities that are there outside going on is completely gone. So therefore, that Bhagavan etasmin purushe kane swapanti. Who is that? Who is this? And kasmin jagrati. If it is only swapanti, goes away, withdraws, then that's over. But then he wakes up. Now, who is that who wakes you up again and then resets the whole scene here? It's like a drama scene. Yesterday it was there, drama, and then finish over, and then today again the drama is set. Somebody is there setting all those things again. Brings about the object, brings about everything that is there within you. Everything brings about. So therefore, Kasmin Jagrati, there is somebody who is doing that, who has to do this. Kataraye Tashmin Deva Swapnan Pashyati. Now, if it were only supposed to be the sleep and the wakeful, like switch off and switch on, only these two things are going on, that's a different thing. But then the third important thing, which also is our own experience, that even though that the objects are not there outside, but then the seeing takes place, but the seeing in the form of a dream. That is what is Swapnan Pashyati Devaha. Now, this Deva is actually given to the mind. Now, why we have the same word for mind and the god Deva is that here the Swapna, it's the Swapna that you see, and also the concept of God concept that people have it. The whole God concept that people have it belong to this Swapna world, or in other words, we should say that that's what is a subtle world. There is a subtle world in which all these things are there. All this is created, and so Kasya Yoshukam, and this particular Swapna world, that he is somebody who is enjoying. That's why he creates. Kasyeva tatsukam kasminu sarve sampratishta bhavanti. Now, all these things, on what all these things are dependent. Now, if something has to go into the sleep, somebody has to wake up and somebody has to create everything and the wakeful state and systematically take it back. And something has to be created in the dream, and again, all the objects and everything has to be done. There must be somebody who is, and somebody also seem to be enjoying that, experiencing that. So many times it's dream is not an experience of joy, but suffering. Then we wake up and say, "Oh, thank God that I woke up. The dream is not continuing." So dream has all kinds of experiences that are there. But then all these things are happening, and there's some uh, guidance and some principle under which that it, all these things to be done. Sampratishtita sambhavati. So bhavanti. So all these things happen because of indeed depend on what. This is what the question that Shishya asked. It's a very, very important question because it takes us into the level where it is not only the gross world, but it takes us into the subtle world. Tasmai Sovacha. Now, Yatha Gargyaha Marichayo अर्कस्य अर्कस्यास्तं गच्छतः सर्वा एतस्मिन् तेजोमण्डलः एकीभवन्ति तः पुनः पुनः उदयते प्राचयत्येह वै तत्सर्वं परं देवे मनस्येकी भवति तेन तस्यैष पुरुषो न शृणोति न पश्यति न जिघ्रति न रसयते न स्पृश्यते न भिवन्दते न दत्ते नानन्दते न विसृजते नो येते नो यायते स्वपिताश्च चक्षते. So this is the answer that he gives. Sarva etasmin tejo mandalaha eki bhavati. Like the way that now he brings about the parallel of whatever that is there in the creation outside. Pipalada replies that he is saying that, like the way when the sun rises, you see that everything comes into the manifestation, everything comes to the life, and the setting sun becomes one with the dusk of the light. What happens to the sun? The sun merges into the brightness, and that brightness slowly then becomes forth again, and then becomes silent, and then again it comes forth. The sun next rises, and these same way these senses become one with the highest deva, the mind. Therefore, at that time, the person no more hears. So the same way, whatever that happens with the sun merges into the tejaha. This is what is the sun. What we see is not the object sun, but it is nothing but the tejas that we see. But we objectify it to the sun. It is the tejas, it merges into that tejas, and the tejas merges into consciousness that goes away, and then the whole thing comes back again. The same way that here, now we have seen earlier that how the mind wanted to see, desired to see, becomes eyes, desired to hear becomes ears. So all these things will merge back into the mind, and that's what he calls it as devaha. Like the way sun, everything, all the rays will go back to the sun, merge into the sun. The same way that all the senses become one with the deva, the mind that is there. And therefore at all the time the person, when the moment that it merges, that takes place, merger takes place, then he no more hears, no more hearing takes place, no more seeing, no more smelling, tasting, feeling. All these things will be also be withdrawn, will also be withdrawn. This is also known as the understood as in the in Vedanta Prakriya, they call it as the way that Kaivalya is where it, what happened to the fire when you stop, when you put off the fire, it went back into the wick, it went back into the oil, it is back there. So it just goes back into it. Once again, that when you light it, then under the influence of that light, it comes out, it comes back. This way, when it goes back, this is what is called as Kaivalya. So this, and that's why Kaivalya Prakarana, the Kaivalya aspect is something where that all these things are withdrawn and then get back to the source. And this is the way that the moment that when all these things are going on, in fact, it can be our own experience. You can see that this kind of an experience. Um, you are hearing something and suddenly a sleep overtakes you. You see what happens is that first the sound merges into the hearing and then the hearing merges back into the mind so that hearing and sound, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. And but suddenly when you wake up again, all those things will come back into the picture. Many times it happens when you're doing the Shavasana, the relaxation technique where DRT, whatever it is, and then instructions are coming, we are lying down and slowly withdrawing takes place. And you see that you are no more hearing any instructions. Sometimes you even wonder whether you are sleeping, the instructions are not coming. So this way that it looks like that it goes back into the source. Similarly, now what happens is that the sensory organ is there, sensory object is there, and then the seeing in between or the process in between is by this prana. Prana is the one which creates this process. And in order to create that process, prana takes the support of that sensory organ. So all these things which are interacting with the sensory, with the objective world outside sensory organ, they're all withdrawn. But then after that, you can see that, like the way they are all withdrawn. But you mean to say that every prana is withdrawn? No, there are certain pranas which are acting at some other places, they continue to be there. Now, let me give you this. Here he brings about analogy. Pranagnayaha evai tasmin pure jagrati garhapatyoha va esha apanaha vyanaha avah anvaharya pachane yad yad garhapatyan praniyate pranayana ahavaniya pranaha. So now the flames of the prana are alone awake. I used to remember when we were all very small, those days electricity was not there. At that time, we used to have one fire, that is what we used to call it as Nandadipa, used to be there in front of the god, which is burning. And then we used to take the fire from that and then light our lamps and all those things, and also light the kitchen cooking range, everything. And those days it's a cooking, a different kind of stove we used to use it, and all that. And with that, we used to do the food. At the moment everything is stopped in the night, when all these things are closed, then every light is gone, but there's only one light that is there in the house. We used to have enough kerosene in the lamps in such a way that the lamps would burn from 6 o'clock in the evening right up to 9:30, and 9:30 everything will die, finish, everything goes away, because only so much of fuel is to be there. One that is gone, then every light is gone. But then where does all this light go away? Is the idea is that this go back to Nandadipa. That means this is the main source light that is there. So similarly, here he says that the flames of the prana alone are awake, and that Nanda Deepa is supposed to be the prana, the brightness, in the city of this body at the time of sleep. Apana is the Garhapatya fire, Vyana is the Anavahatya Pachana fire, and the Prana is the Ahavaniya fire because it's taken out of Garhapatya fire. All these things are drawn from the Garhapatya fire, which is supposed to be Nanda Deepa, and then do all these works. And when the work is over, then they go back to the self. Now, if he comes to the fourth sutra, so they say, Yad Uchvasa Nitvasa, Nichvasa Vedan, Ahutihi Samam Naiditi Samanaha, Manohabhava Yajamanaha, Ishtapalamevo Danaha, Yayenam Yajamanam, Aharha Brahma Gamayati. Now, here he brings about the concept of Yajamana. Now, let me tell you, go back to the idea of Yajna. There are various priests who are doing various activities. When you go to any Yajna, you can see that. There's somebody who is doing some mantra, somebody, main mantra, somebody chants, and somebody is there, ask them to repeat this mantra several times and all that, and then do the offerings to the fire. So they will all be doing as a combination of some 15, 20 people together that they'll be doing. But in spite of the fact that all those people are doing all those things, that they would have one person as Yajamana, and he is the owner or he is the leader, he is the head of that particular uh, fire ceremony, Yajamana. And there are certain prescriptions that he should be with his wife, so that husband and wife, and then they have to do the sankalpa. Sankalpa is from both of them together that they have to do the sankalpa. It is Yajamana who takes the sankalpa, and then when he does the sankalpa, and that's when that means to say he is the one who is organizing everything under whose this thing, and it is Yajamana who gets the yajna phala. It's not these people who are doing the puja. They are all supposed to do it because that it is their dharma. According to dharma, they are supposed to do that. Then they do it. For their phala, then they have to do the yajna, they have to do the karmas or anushtana for themselves. They have different anushtana for them. But whereas this yajna, what they do it, the phala comes to the yajamana. Similarly, in Ramayana, that the yajna, Ramayana yajna was done by Dasharatha. And all these people, priests were there, top priests were there. Like, for example, Valmiki, Vasishtha was there, and then Vishwamitra was there, and then Gautama. All these people were there. In spite of the fact all these people were there, especially uh, he has come Putrakameshti to do the Putrakameshti. So with all those things, but Putrakameshti Phala, who got it? It is Yajamana who was given that. It is Yajamana Sankalpa. So Dasharatha was the Yajamana. It's not that he chanted the mantras. So this setup that is there is very similar to the one that is the setup in the nature, and that's what he says that Asmin Shwas, all these now that he talks about Yajamanam Aharam Brahma Gamayati. Again, this it is Yajamana goes back to Brahman and comes back into the creation, into the activity. So you are that Yajamana, and then you come back. All these other things are the paraphernalia arranged for you. Now, Yajamana, while talking about this Yajamana, he especially brings about the idea of Uchvasa, Nichvasa, Uchvasa, Swasayata, Samam Nayati, Samanaha. Now, we have earlier discussed about Samana. Samana is that which continuously balances, and is the balancing that creates the life to go on. The Samana is there to put the balance into the creation so that the balance will take you forward. Now, this uh, when the Samana is not taken care of, that means to say one side fails the other side, then you become sick, and then the whole problem starts. Of all these various samanas that is created in the whole system, the most fundamental samana that creates is the between the Uchvasa and Nichvasa, breathe in and breathe out, or the inspiration and expiration. And this is the priest. He is a priest called as Hota. Hota is supposed to be the priest who is creating the samana, and but the mind, which is supposed to be uh, is supposed to be the Yajamana. For the sake of mind, all these things are being done. The mind is the one which makes all these things possible. So let me once again recollect the idea that I said. Mind wanted to create. Mind gave up its freedom to become various pranas, various pranas. Prana, Apana, Vyana, Udana, all these things have become because of that. So mind holds the idea of Udana. Now this Yajamana and Udana is the fruit of this sacrifice. Now why this whole creation has to be kept in balance in the harmony? So that what happens is that mind can go towards the higher level, and that's what is becoming one with the Brahman. And, uh, and the fruit is supposed to be Udana, Urthvam Gachati Udana. The upward force that takes us towards the higher level, that's what is Udana. But then Udana can take you to the upward force. We are strengthening the upward force to go, which is something which is very important. But at the same time, this upward force that goes, if you carry along with that your other impressions, your vasanas, then you will not reach Brahman. That means you come back again to fulfill that vasanas and all that. But it has a capacity to take you towards Brahman. So Brahma Gamayati takes leads. So in the case of every day in the sleep, what happens is that you are touching the Brahman because that vasanas also are not there. Vasanas do not function on that. Vasanas do not interfere with you because that do not belong to you. Vasanas are superimposed on you. But you are touching the Brahman every night when you go to the bed. Therefore, that you have experience of Brahmasthiti, that deep sleep state. That's one of the reasons why we should see that in yoga, it is to see that how klesha tanukaranartham. It is to remove the kleshas, the vasanas which are holding, but not to create this samadhi. Samadhi is your own nature. Samadhi is already there within you. Brahman is always your nature. You are there in that. But only thing is that all the practices that you do is to see that how you can remove the vasanas that are there in between. Otherwise, every night when we go to sleep, and that is deep sleep state, is you go into that state where there is nothing is there, everything is stopped, and then you go to the Brahmasthiti. Because none of these vasanas do not belong to you, nothing holds on to you. Your interaction is there, and the moment interaction stops, you go back to the Brahman source. Like the way that nirvana takes place every night when you go to bed, which is a common thing. Now, wonderful. This is as far as the first two questions that he asked, and that is what wakes him up and what goes to sleep. So it is Yajamana goes back to Brahman, and then Yajamana comes to do the whole yajna. But such a person or such an activity is yajna where Yajamana himself is doing the activity without any interference. And let's go back to the Patanjali Yoga Sutras where he says that in the Sadhana Pada that there is one portion which is called as Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga idea is, as we were discussing about Kriya Yoga in the other lecture, where we have two different terms that are there called as the karma and the kriya. What's the difference between the karma and kriya? Karma is that where kartru is there. Kriya is there where kartru is not there. So an example I was quoting normally for that is, you take the food and masticate in the mouth and then you gulp it. Once you gulp it, the food goes all the way downwards. Nobody is there to do anything for you, and then you cannot say that I am digesting food because you are not there. Until you take the food and put it in the mouth, you are there. but afterwards you are not there. So first portion is what is called as karma. That's why second portion you call it as Pachana Kriya. It's a Kriya. It's a Kriya is an activity that goes on. On its own, there is no ego in that. So when the moment that there is no ego, that means there is no attachment, there is no nothing connected with that. So it just happens smoothly. That's what Patanjali says, that can you convert every activity into karma into Kriya? That's what is the purpose of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is a state where that the least amount of I being there conceptually, and then activity is going on. So therefore, that the less and less that I put the I behind it, the more and more that I become Yajamana myself, and that purely does the activity of going. So it's a very smooth activity, wakeful and the sleep. And who is enjoying in the sleep? And that Yajamana, you are in the Brahma sthiti. There's no other activity that's going on. But then what happens is now the sleep or the dream. अत्रैष देवः स्वप्ने महिमानम् अनुभवति यदृष्टं दृष्टमनुपश्यति श्रुतं श्रुतमेव अर्थम् अनुशृणोति देशादिगं देश दिगन्तरैश्च प्रत्या प्रत्य अनुभूतं पुनः पुनः प्रत्यनुभूतं दृष्टं च श्रुतं च अनुभूतं च सच्च सर्वं पश्यति सर्वं पश्यति. Now, Mahimanam Anubhavati. Sapne, Atre Devaha, Swapne, Mahimanam Anubhavati. An extraordinary, wonderful experience is Anubhavati. Who? Devaha. This is the idea that we need to understand it clearly. Deva is also the mind, it is also the God. Deva is supposed to be God, the way that we use it, and also uses for the sake of mind. In other words, that the mind itself is God, and what kind of mind is God? That pure mind, that contaminated kind of a mind, it is just filled with only one point that is there is supposed to be the mind. And that mind is Deva because it has got all that potential. Because this Deva is something which has given rise to various sensory organs. And now what happens is that all these objects and sensory organs, the subtle aspect of it are taken inside. The gross world outside that is there, from that, all these things are taken to the subtle aspect into the self inside. Therefore, basically, whatever you see, experience outside is the same thing that you are experiencing inside also. That's why he gives like that. So, punaha punaha pratyanubhavati. Yadrishtam drishtam anupashyati. Whatever that you have seen, again that you see there. You see the objects here, you see the objects there. You hear shrutam shrutamevārthaman shrunoti. Whatever that you hear there. If you are really pure, many times that you hear whatever that is there in the world outside, you continue to hear them outside, so that, it was always said by Swami Vivekananda, kind of a person, that the sleep, the dream that they used to memorize, that whatever that object that was there supposed to be, which they did not have enough time in the wakeful state. The dream was working like that. For Buddha, it was something supposed to be like that. So that Shrunoti, Deshad Digantaschaihi Pratyanubhutam Punaha Punaha Pratyanubhavati. Whatever that is there, a detail that is there available here outside, and again, it has been enjoyed different places and the countries, everything. It gets there because it's all in the subtle form. You have taken it in the subtle form and you enjoy, you interact in that subtle form in the deep sleep state. Not only these things, but your own imagination, your own, what is that, enrichment that you get through your bhava, mind, and all that you can experience that. You can experience much more than that. So it's not just only the dream that normal people see it, but it is much more than dream-like state. It's much more than that. It's a subtle state, and that is subtle state is a state where great people have such wonderful experience of, uh, which we call it as not anymore dream, but it's like visions. It's various perceptions that श्रुतं च अश्रुतं च अनुभूतं च अनुभूतं च सच्च असच्च सर्वं पश्यति सर्वः पश्यति, everything that you see. So therefore, in this particular category, this is where it says that our mind is the Yajamana. That means to say, from the consciousness, the representative consciousness is in the form of a mind, which is actually supervising, which is creating all those things and then getting all the experiences and then taking back uh, the experience and the objects, everything into the dream state in a subtle world, and that subtle world creation takes place. Whatever that you create in the subtle world, that you give the reality to that, and that's where basically all these gods and goddesses, everything that you have, the forum, we have various activities, we have ideas that are there. Though in reality, outside world it may not be there, you don't have to do that, but then you create the whole thing inside. Sayada tejaha abhibhuto bhavati atraisha devaha swapnan pashyati atra tade asmin sharire tatsukham bhavati. So when the mind is overpowered by the light, then in that state the mind sees no dream. Then the time bliss occurs in this body. What is this light? Like, for example, whatever the light that is, the sunlight is something which is on the object outside that you see, the brightness that is there from the sun, the light from the sun that falls on the object, and only we are seeing that light on the object outside, and then the perception takes place. That means to say, we are only perceiving the light, but then we attribute it to the object that is there outside. So it's as if that we are seeing the object outside. Yes, we are perceiving the object outside, very true. But then the same way that, but actually it is the light which is creating. If you can see that the pure inner light from which that the same uh, Adityavai Pranaha, earlier sutra that we have seen, the prana is nothing but the sun. And that sun, that brightness appears, falls on that dream. Then you don't see anymore the dream, but you see a different world, and then you have such a different sukham, blissful state. At that level, if somebody who has only the concept of bliss, and then he'll be blissful. Somebody who has the concept of only light, he only sees the light. But whereas somebody who has various forms, the same brightness he will see various forms and various activities that he has, that same brightness he will see various activities, and that will give him that immense kind of a joy that is there in the subtle world. And that all that joy, who gets it? It is this consciousness that is there, which is the pure state of mind, and that is what you get it. That's why mind with vasanas, consciousness with vasanas is mind. Mind minus vasanas is the consciousness. Vasana, please note it very clearly that mind without vasanas is consciousness, Brahman, whereas the consciousness with vasanas is mind. At the mind level, because the vasanas are there, therefore the whole perception passes through the vasanas, therefore that you see them about the about the dream. Whereas when all that vasanas are not there, then pure light is there reflected. What you see is like the spiritual experience or the vision or the subtle world that you come across. So, and this world will give you an extension of whatever that joy, satisfaction, nor the pain, pleasure, whatever that is there, it's an extension of that you get in the dream. But when you don't have the vasanas, then what you get is not extension of this world, but it is that blissful state of an experience of Brahmasthiti, experience that you have. So that's why it is, this is what is dull, whereas that's what is bright. That's brighter than the world outside. That's why Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says that I have seen God more clearly than I see you now. That means what I see you now is already, I'm in the world outside, influenced by the world. Whereas I see there God without any influence of that. Prithvim cha prithvi matra cha, आपश्चापो मात्रा च तेजस्य चेदो मात्रा च वायुश्च वायु मात्रा च आकाशश्चाकाश मात्रा च चक्षुषः द्रष्टव्यं च श्रोत्रं च श्रोतव्यं च घ्राणं च घ्रातव्यं च वक्त्रं वक्त्रं च हस्तौ च आदातव्यं च पायुश्च विसर्जस्यं च पादौ च गन्तव्यं च मनश्च मनस्यं च बुद्धिश्च बोधव्यं च. So all these things, chittam cha iti tavyam cha tejascha vidati cha pranascha vidarayitvam cha. So therefore, all these things, the seeing will go back to the eyes will go back to the power of seeing, ears will go back to the hearing, and then like eyes and ears and all those things, they go back to their nest, like the way the beautiful analogy that he gives is all those things will go back to the nest the moment that you go to the deep sleep state. Or the prithivyam cha prithvi matram, not only these things, but eyes are creating object outside, even that object also will go along with you all the way into yourself so that they merge into the yourself. This is the one, and Yesha hi drashta, spashta, srota, घ्राता रसयिता मंता च बोद्धा कर्ता विज्ञानात्मा पुरुषः सपरेक्ष अक्षरः आत्मनि संप्रतिष्ठते. He is the doer. This aspect that's there within us, who is enjoying, is the one. That's the one who sees, is the one who feels, who hears, smells, tastes, and thinks and knows. He is the doer, the intelligent ego, the Purusha. It dwells in the highest indestructible self. So the self that is there within us, and that's what is the one who is experiencing that. And is Akshara Atmani Sampratishtati. Ksharaha is something which can die. Aksharaha does not die, which is the same thing. And why Aksharaha? There's one more aspect is Kshara happens because of the vasanas. The limitation happens because of the vasanas. Akshara is something where are free from the vasanas. And that experience of you are that Parame Atmane, and you go to that experience of yours. After that, another couple of sutras are there. We will continue that before we go to the fifth sutra, fifth quarry. There's only one more sutra, previous one. So these things we'll see next class we meet. Let's close it with the Shanti Mantra. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।